Hello and welcome to another exhilarating episode of The Gold Standard with Alan Mosley. And here's your host, Alan Mosley.
Everybody be really, really quiet.
Why?
Shh. This is going to become an ASMR channel.
Okay.
No, it's not actually. Guys, welcome back to The Gold Standard. I am your host, Alan Mosley. As always, you can catch us on social media, which is facebook.com/TGS Alan Mosley. Twitter is at Alan M. Mosley, but you don't have to do any of that. Because you can just go to our website, which is thegoldstandardpodcast.com.
That's right.
Did I tell you somebody went to our donation link and typed in, they didn't type in 99999.
Oh, man.
No, they
That's
didn't.
a drag.
They didn't do that. But they did type in numbers, and we thank you.
Awesome.
I always kind of like balk at saying someone's name if I didn't like specifically message them and say, hey, can I, like we talk about people we don't like on the show all the time and use their names. But if I had respect for you and I didn't know if you wanted me to announce your name, I wouldn't do it unless I had your permission. I bet I have Remso's permission though.
Sure you do.
So speaking of that, our guest today is Remso W. Martinez. He is a journalist and Amazon best-selling author of Stay Away from the Libertarians. You can follow him on Twitter at Remso4VA or on his website, rwmartinez.com. Remso, how's it going?
Alan, can't complain because, if I were any better, I would be you right now.
You lie to me literally is the first thing you do when you come on the show. I can't believe it.
I've been talking on my channel and everything about the honesty to bullshit scale, and I'm trying to find that nice place between being somewhat honest but kind of a bullshitter like O.J. Simpson is, and being a complete bullshitter like most politicians are. So I want to be in that nice plane between bullshit and honesty because I think that's what people expect these days.
Now, I wasn't going to bring this up, but since you already kind of did, I have to ask you. Explain to me what I was reading on Twitter the other day from you that had something to do with who was more popular between O.J. Simpson and somebody else. You were talking about O.J. Simpson.
Yeah, I just wanted to get a gut reaction out of people. Who would you trust a baby with, AOC or O.J.? I don't understand why it's such a hard question. The answer is obviously O.J. Simpson.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah.
All his kids are alive and fully functioning.
Yeah, exactly right. So I'm going to pull up so that everybody at home can see this really quick.
Oh, wow, you're going all that way. Okay.
Yeah, I know. This is this is the Amazon link that I had pulled up. Stay away from the Libertarians. I'm going to read this little intro blurb that you have right here so I can ask you a question. Why do people hate libertarians? One part of America calls them soulless robber barons who want to stick children back in factories, and the other part thinks they are drugged up anarchists. Now, I gotta ask you. Let's be honest, Remso. Do you think that the layman really knows enough about what libertarian even means to have an opinion one way or the other?
Absolutely, because people come up with stupid opinions about things they don't understand all the time. I will go to my grave saying that. I stand by that 100%. Because that's when I first started getting into journalism specifically, I was investigating a case regarding possible money laundering with former Attorney General Eric Holder. And I'm in a pretty well-to-do portion of the country in Northern Virginia, right outside of D.C. If you look at the concentration of wealth and influence in America, I'm on the outskirt of it, living in the middle-class suburbs. So I go to this massive festival where the Democrats are and where a bunch of politicians are, and I'm just asking people, what do you know about Eric Holder? The guy was Obama's AG for 6 years. So you'd think that the people around here, I'm talking to the type of people that might know who he is or have a gleaning idea of who he is. I interviewed probably about 30 people, and my last question always was, the baseline then was, do you know who Eric Holder is? And then I would show them a picture of a white dude, some random white dude I found on Google Images, and they would say, yes, that's him. And immediately I would scrap their interview.
Yeah.
People are willing to go on and talk about stuff, talk about people, talk about things, believe in stuff they know nothing about, because in our culture today, it's better to say something, be heard, be wrong, and never be caught than to look like you don't know what you're saying. Jimmy Kimmel does it all the time when he does his man on the street interviews.
Yeah.
What did MLK say about MLK Day 2018? Oh, he said it was great. He loved it. He loved the parade. Yeah. What do you think about Beyonce singing? Oh, he loved her. Him and Beyonce are friends. Yeah, he's been dead since like 68, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I've encountered the worst and the best, and the worst is always thinking they're the best.
Well, okay, but so what about this? So because you're combating those typical misconceptions about what liberty is and what it means and about what anarchists really do. It's not the typical bandana around the face, throwing Molotov cocktails type nonsense that most people believe. But I still kind of balk at what, to me, there's two camps. There's the people who, and you can tell me which of these is actually the bigger problem to you. Is it the people who really don't understand what libertarianism is, and so you're trying to tell them, oh, no, it's not, we're not trying to set up our child labor factories and all that? Or is it rather the people who they just flat out reject liberty? Like they understand what it is that you're about, and they reject it outright. Like it's something they're genuinely not interested in.
I think it generally comes into both camps, because I think everyone starts on the latter, and then if they allow you to have a conversation with them, eventually everything devolves to, well, you're right about all the points you made. I just don't like it. I don't like less government. I don't like more civil liberties. It always gets down to that point, and I think it's really important to converse with people, because I think more folks than not, just at base level, they like being slaves to something. Mm-hmm. Slaves to information, slaves to authority, slaves to debt, all three, something. Everyone's a slave to something. You just need to get them to admit it, because on the outside, everyone wants to be a humanitarian. Everyone wants to be peaceful. But God forbid you touch their one precious thing, whether it be the cops, whether it be public schools. Public school teachers do not like me because of the stuff. When I first started getting involved in the realm of policy and politics, a lot of my work was in education reform. You talk about teachers, you talk about PTA or school board, people will pull out knives. It's crazy. I think the biggest problem, though, and I cover this throughout the book, is we have what I refer to as one of the many trinity of sins. You've got academia, media, and politicians, all the bastions of authority where those people know all and you know very little. And it's not that they know really anything about libertarians, but they do know the baseline premise. Mm-hmm. No one has the right to pull unjust authority or coercion or force over other people unjustly without their consent. It's that basic premise that they reject. Therefore, they will do everything. It's like a part of their being. They have to destroy what they can't control. And there's no better way to do it than with misinformation, with calculated lies, and through silencing. So this book really cuts through all of that, cuts through academia, media, and the politicians.
Well, you know me. I'm nothing if not a cynical person, and I tend to fall into the camp of thinking that there's those flowery words out there of, a lot of people would say, if you just asked them, hey, do you believe in personal liberty? They would say, oh yeah, I mean, sure, why not? But then when you actually start talking about specific issues or policy points, all of a sudden you very quickly find, well, they don't actually believe in personal liberty. We were just talking just recently here. We're in Tennessee, so we're just south of you, and we're getting more and more nanny state laws. Like for instance, this is going to be going away pretty soon in your car. It's coming down. It's almost assuredly going to be passed. Oof. Where you can't be holding a cell phone or doing it, while operating a vehicle. That's going to be subject to fines and whatnot. They're in the process of passing laws against raw milk and stuff, which that particularly hurts me because I'm like, this is the South, and in the traditional South, you tend to think, well, that's agriculture, that's farms, that's people who you would think traditionally wouldn't be for big nanny state type activity, but here we are, and it's all passing through the state house with ease. And so again, I tend to think that a lot of libertarians think that if they talk to someone on the street and they can just get them for 5 minutes and tell them all the wonderful truths about liberty, that they're just going to magically convert. But I'm more cynical than that. I don't think they will.
I agree with you to a large extent. And I mean, as someone that's worked in sales and direct marketing, the one thing I do know is a fact is that everyone wants to buy, not everyone wants to be sold. It's somewhat the same principle for politics. And generally, when, it's like, I feel bad for, like, in DC, we have a ton of Jehovah's Witnesses that will hang outside the metro. Like, no one's talking to those guys. You could be offering them cash. I mean, they're not coming to you. But ultimately what we're dealing with is a giant shift in worldview, how you view yourself and everything around you. What is your purpose and what is your end goal? You live in a society where you're not told what your freedoms are. You're told what your freedoms aren't. You're told that you are only part of a cog in a wheel and that the individual really means nothing, and that your whole purpose is to pay taxes and die so that way you can make room for somebody else who's more efficient. And that's the biggest problem we have. And when it comes to libertarians, I mean, I think I think the biggest problem is ourselves to a certain degree, because we know we're right and we can't stand people who are wrong. But I think the biggest way anyone converts to any idea is when they feel the pinch, where they feel the hurt. In Christianity, the Apostle Paul didn't become Paul until he went blind in the desert and he saw Christ, for example. Like, that's a big 180 turn from being the guy stoning Christians to being the guy that's planting more churches than Christ. It's like that within libertarian circles. My parents, I like to poke fun at them, for example. My mom, for one situation, she didn't understand what civil asset forfeiture was until she got pulled over for having tinted windows, which were a bit too dark. And she sat in traffic court and saw what happened when people civil asset forfeiture a person's car. So she's watching other cases before her very eyes. And at one point, this one guy who's been held in jail for a few months, he's like, "Where's my car?" And the judge is like, "Oh, we seized it and sold it." So my mom drives a really expensive Volvo, and she's like, "Oh, crap, they could do that to me." So now she's the biggest anti-civil asset forfeiture advocate. But she didn't get to that point because originally it was like, "Oh, this only applies to drug dealers. Oh, this only applies to criminals. The state won't do that to me. I'm a good tax-paying citizen." But so was that guy who made a mistake, driving while under the influence, and for no reason that they were able to justify, they just seized and sold his car. Why? He had a nice BMW.
Yeah.
So I think people have to feel the pain sometimes. I think war does that. I think economic recessions do that. I think massive intrusions on civil liberties do that. I don't think anyone becomes a fighter until they realize that the only option they have is to fight.
Yeah. Well, you had touched a moment ago on education, and of course, it reminds me, because I know that this came up on Twitter recently. I was getting hammered by a bunch of hardcore gun control advocates, and the reason why I was getting hammered was because the Parkland shooting came back up in the news. I don't even remember how it came back up, but the Parkland shooting came back up in the news, and it was all the typical responses of, well, of course, if we just had more gun laws, then no child would ever get shot at school ever. And my answer is that, how about we just abolish public schools? And of course, a lot of people fired back with, that has nothing to do with this. We're talking about a totally different issue. And I thought, well, are we though? And it reminded me, I guess this is framing my next question to you is, would you say that some of the problem that libertarians have when dealing with, for lack of a better word, normies? I mean, you're talking to somebody, let's say you're talking to somebody who is not combative. They're not just resisting for the sake of resisting. They're listening to what you have to say, but they're totally, there's no wokeness factor here. They have no idea what you're talking about. Would you say that a big issue with it is your typical indoctrinated public school student just doesn't have the imagination required to think how the world could be any different?
I think that is a bit of a thing, and there are 2 points I want to touch on. I'll touch at the last point first and the first last. But Plato came up with his famous short story, The Allegory of the Cave. You've got 3 people that are chained to a boulder and they can only see forward, but behind the boulder is a fire, and at night they could see the shadows on the walls. So the idea is, if let's say one of their chains broke, would they stay in the cave or would they leave for freedom? And that's the big question that we have to ask ourselves all the time, because through our public education, through our other civil indoctrinators, that is much of the situation. That's why people who are free thinkers are often ostracized for doing so. I will go back to the first point, however, where you mentioned let's just abolish public schools. I've done that before, and I think it's always circumstantial, because among some of my more indoctrinated friends, for example, we were talking about racial quotas in schools, and I'm just reading a comic book or something, and I'm like, man, affirmative action is state-sponsored racism. And they all got quiet. They all got quiet, and they looked at each other, and they were so uncomfortable they didn't want to talk about it until all my friends was like, so are we just not going to say anything about that? And then it turned into a whole thing. Like, that's what I would do in that situation amongst people I'm comfortable with. But amongst most people, like, people make fun of like Beltway libertarians, for example. Like, I think everyone has a purpose, and we have a role to play, and you can't just go out and say stuff like that, because then they're gonna think you're making fun of the process. I was on a radio show a few months ago promoting my next book, and at one point we were talking about Trump or something, and I'm pretty indifferent towards the whole process. So I was just like, why do we need a president? Like, why? Like, why can't we just be single for a while? We'll all just read, eat, pray, love, meditate, go to the gym, focus on ourselves, be single, and then go out and start dating dictators. But that just got a whole storm of stuff. So what we have is a big problem that I think some libertarians have, is that all the time they're doing that. They're doing that in every single conversation. There's an old saying within the Libertarian Party, for example. It's called the macho flash. It's, instead of saying, I want to decriminalize drugs because I believe it's a health issue, not a crime issue, and that way we could have more fiscal responsibility because we're closing prisons and we're putting people back into the workforce. That's a very sanitized, numbers, facts-based answer. Then you have some people that are like, I want to end the drug war because I want heroin crack machines in public schools.
Yeah, exactly.
Who's gonna get invited back on?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's a bit of a problem. I mean, I think we're too quick. We're somewhat we have somewhat of a savior complex. When you look at the psychology of libertarians, it's a big thing. We have a little bit of a savior complex because we're like, all you sheeple are running off the cliff. Only I can save you. So we're quick to do that. We need to understand that what we're dealing with is an issue that people have been dealing with since the dawn of humanity. It's a marathon, not a sprint. I mean, the fact that we're having conversations like this, like if you had spoken to me 6 years ago, I was not a libertarian. Not many people were libertarians 10 years ago. I mean, I meet people who have been like, libertarians since John Hospers and Ron Paul, 1988, but that's very rare. That's a very large minority. Only now are these conversations becoming more bountiful, and I think that's a sign of positive change.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like there's some of that Dunning-Kruger effect mixed in there too, of that I'm always humbled when I talk to somebody that in my mind they're a genius, and their attitude is that, oh, but there's so many others that I've learned so much from. But unfortunately, most people are the opposite end of the Dunning-Kruger spectrum, which is people who are like, as Eric July calls them, they're level 1 woke. Like they're only
Ben Shapiro woke.
Yeah, exactly. They're only smart enough to realize the world isn't perfect, but they think that since the world isn't perfect, we need to hashtag resist by, electing Obama to 30 more years in office or something like that. This is another one of my favorite ones, is that Bernie Sanders, who is like the picture of the establishment, and they'll say, I only vote non-establishment. I vote Bernie Sanders, and I'm like, dude. So those are the people that I refer to as level 1 woke. But those are the people that they're smart enough to join the conversation and to look like they know what they're talking about. But those are exactly the kind of people that if they were talking to you, they would say, yeah, Remso, you're right. The schools aren't perfect. Therefore, we should appropriate another $1 trillion to the schools via the United States government. And you'd be like, wait, that's not what I was. When I said I don't like the schools, my answer wasn't fund the schools more. My answer was do something completely different. I mean, but how do you break through to that person who, like I said, so the question I'm framing is that they realize that there's something wrong, but in their mind, the only answer can possibly be more of the same.
I want to make fun of someone since you're in Tennessee, Alex Shaw?
Yeah.
Alex and I went to school together.
Really?
In Alabama. Yeah, we went to school together. And when I met Alex, like, I'm not gonna say he was a total statist, but he was, he was a few miles south of communism. And when I came to work in D.C., Alex was doing something else, and he was basically given a research project where he was supposed to evaluate the cause and effect of why Common Core is being implemented across the country. And ironically, that was when I was working at FreedomWorks, and my whole thing was attacking Common Core. So he actually took the time to listen to me because he wanted, at the time he probably thought I was more conservative, but he wanted to hear a different approach to Common Core than what he was probably getting. So after months and months and months, Alex is like, wow, Common Core is shit. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, it should be done away with. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, we need to pump more money into it. And I'm like, no. Eventually, obviously, he figured it out a while later. But, I think at that time he was level 1 woke.
Yeah.
And, the thing about those people is God bless them, because I think they're the most willing to admit that they don't know everything and that they're willing to listen. And those people, I think everyone was like that. I was woke level 1 at one point. I was diet woke. I was woke 0. I was bargain brand woke. It wasn't very woke enough, but I was getting there. But, it just takes time with these people, and we need to be patient with them, because if they're not willing to listen to us, they're not going to want to hear us when we're talking at them.
Yeah. Now I know you're a journalist, and you've spent some years in the D.C. area, so you've been more actively involved in politics than crazy backwoods redneck anarchists like myself. But how do you reconcile with the strain of the anarchists that say that, well, look, I don't really care about any of that. I just want to be left alone. But we live in a world where that's just not possible. I mean, it's look, I don't vote, and I don't ever support any politician on this program ever. But I'm aware enough to realize that while in our libertarian society, if you wanted to set up a commune somewhere, we would say good luck to you. But we'll do our own thing. But we don't live in a libertarian society. We live in a society where they're going to do what they want. And if we say, oh, well, just let us go, we're going to set up our little commune, they're going to say, okay, that's great, but send us your taxes or we'll blow your brains out. We don't live in a world where...
Worked out for Waco, didn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to... It's something that I know Gene Epstein harps on that all the time, that in the society we want, if you guys wanted to do your own thing to see if your calculations would provide, then we would say good luck. But in the society that you want to build, we would have to bend the knee to you, as the Game of Throners would say. So how do you reconcile being involved in politics and being aware of politics and that being something that you've written about and spoken about, and then reckon that with kind of that niche audience of people that are like, man, I don't care. I don't follow DC. I just want to be left alone.
Like I look at everything like I look at business, and I mean, anyone that's owned a business knows this. You're either growing or you're dying, and you have to only spend time on the things that's helping you grow. Ultimately, it's like, people that don't vote, people that want nothing to do with civil society. Like, the way I see it, their impact is neutral. Mm-hmm. Like, they're already living a much more libertarian lifestyle than most of us. My problem is the people that are forcing their version of society upon others, because that's effect positive, because it's pushing an impact. I'd rather us go into effect negative, where we're not using violence, force, or coercion to try and push this out there. We do it voluntarily. So my concern is with there's way more of them than there are of us, and with the way I see it, like, you're not harming me, you're not doing anything, you're obviously at the point in your life where you're pretty comfortable and you can argue for yourself. The way I see it, like, it's not really worth much of my time, because I somewhat agree with you. I'm also just a very tenacious, scrappy person. So I think using my talents, using my attitude towards things, my impact is meant to try and bring people over to impact negative. It's like, let's stop forcing other people to do this. Let's just talk. Because once you're neutral, go live long and prosper.
Yeah.
But, until we get to that point, I mean, we're dealing with a numbers game. There are far many more of them than there are of us.
Yeah. Well, speaking of living long and prospering, I'm going to pull the browser back up here because as a sequel to Stay Away from the Libertarians, you've got an Indiegogo campaign, and I'm actually going to pull up the link that you have from your website, which is rwmartinez.com. You're working on your next book. Tell us, because I love the name, tell us the name of the next book.
How to Succeed in Politics and Other Forms of Devil Worship.
Okay, so give us a quick little 5-minute preview of what's the direction of this book versus Stay Away from the Libertarians.
While this book is not necessarily a direct sequel to the first book, they both accomplish really the same goal. The first book was really introducing libertarianism to non-libertarians, introducing these ideas of free markets, individual freedom, and what prosperity really looks like in a voluntary society. Whereas this book is really showing you why, regardless as to where you're coming from, the machine hates you. Mm-hmm. Like, ultimately, that's it. Like, politicians aren't your friend. They don't love you. They're not going to send you a Christmas card unless they're asking for money in it. And with this book, what I want to show people is that politics in and of itself is a very, I talk a lot about spirituality, but it's almost like the biggest spiritual fight in your life, because it's the only time where your impact is real every day, and that could be good or bad. So what I do in this book is it's part fiction, it's part nonfiction. What I have two characters. One is a fictional political consultant named Art Brown, who's working between 2016 and 2018. And then the nonfiction character is former Governor George Wallace of Alabama, who I think has lived the most archetypal political story in all of American history. Started off as a very moderate progressive judge who was endorsed by the NAACP, became the biggest anti-civil rights villain of all of history. And what we don't ever talk about is his life afterwards. We don't talk about how he realized, damn, like I've pursued power to the point where I'm destroying the lives of people, and that I have a direct impact on the lives of others. And what have I done? Their lives aren't better. So how do I take, advantage of the time I have left? So it's these two people, one fictional, one today, which I think anyone can really sympathize with and see themselves in, contrasting to that of a person who really lived, whose story is sometimes more outrageous than the fictional side of things. So I want people to have this fictional experience where they're kind of dealing with the everyman journey of it, while at the same time contrasting that to the life somebody lived and what the questions and the challenges and the moral quandaries they had to deal with. Because ultimately, I want people to understand is that, politics and everything we're dealing with is short term. What's your answer when you have to question your impact on eternity? And is politics really the best thing for you in that case? Is it the best way for anybody in that case? What is the purpose of it if you win in politics, but you're losing your humanity in the process?
Yeah. That reminds me of something Milton Friedman had said once in one of his Q&As that he had did that are everyone watches on YouTube.
Uncle Milton's my bedtime storyteller.
Yeah. Well, he had basically said something along the lines of why would you think that there's any politician sitting around waiting to solve any of your problems? And someone had fired back, well, that's their job. They got elected to do X, Y, and Z. And he said, let me clue you in on something. The moment that they win the election, the only thing on their docket to do is to win re-election. That's what they're actively doing. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the thing is, like, I think the first book is for people that are woke level 1.
Yeah.
They know there's a problem and they think that this might be a possible solution. This book is for the people that don't even recognize there's a problem. What I want them to do is I want them to doubt.
Yeah.
And this book was not written for libertarians. It was just written for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's going to have a much wider reach, because regardless as to where you see the solutions being, I think the problem is we need to address there's a very human problem at the core of everything that we're dealing with. And until we begin to ask ourselves those questions, how can we expect any real solutions from others?
Well, that definitely speaks to me. Something that I've said on the program several times, and I might have said it when I was with you a little while back, I don't remember, is that if nothing else, I wish we could get to the point where just the default position for everybody was to not trust government. Even if they ultimately decide, well, you know what, I like that program, or I like that subsidy, or this is my sacred cow. I mean, I hope that that's not the case. But even if that's where they end up, I just want the average person's default position is, I'm gonna assume government is not trustworthy and dare them to prove me wrong, as opposed to I'm gonna assume the state has my interests at heart and then be proven wrong. But I would say, unfortunately, that's probably a lot of people's default position is they just naturally trust authority. And that seems so weird to you and I, though, right? Like, that would seem so weird to the run-of-the-mill libertarian that, oh, well, I'm sure they had good intentions. Like, you would never hear a hardcore
Mao
anarchist
had good
say
intentions.
that. Yeah, exactly. So when is the next book slated to come out?
So right now what we're doing is I've planned to have it come out in March of 2020. But the thing is, the book's already written. So why not try and push the process a little bit sooner? By donating to my Indiegogo,
Sure.
if I can collect at least $1,000 from folks, I can have this out by December 2019. So that's the goal of what we're doing. And with every perk option available, you're getting something out of it. Most of the time, it's discounts on the book itself. It's discounts on signed books. Signed copies of my first book, signed copies of the upcoming book, signed limited edition posters. You could even earn a credit in the book if you so choose. So I want this to be an interactive experience for people, so that way they can have some skin in the game for the story we're trying to tell everybody.
Yeah, definitely. Remso, you're a cool dude. You should come back on again.
Always, man. Whenever you got time, shoot me a link. I'll go ahead and we'll bitch about something.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's all we do. I mean, let's be honest for a second. Let's climb down off the cross for a second and just admit the truth, which is we're really just like to talk shit. That's what.
Absolutely.
That's what
really makes life worth living.
So, Remso, do you have any other announcements, links, advertisements, anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
Big thing right now, and I know that a lot of people are readers, within, I think by August 2019, so a few months from now, the audiobook version of Stay Away from the Libertarians will be out. I'll be voicing it. We have Nick Pacone from the Sounds Like Liberty podcast who will be reading the foreword. This is a great opportunity. You can share it if you've got Audible with people. That way, if you're a reader and you read the book and you want to get it from a different viewpoint, that'll be coming out. So, I mean, I think people are jumping onto audiobooks, and if I can reach them, if I can entertain them, if I can inform them, I think they're going to like it. So, Stay Away from the Libertarians, the audiobook, August 2019.
August 2019. Audiobook of Stay Away from the Libertarians. That's cool. That's really important for libertarians because they're autistic, so a lot of them can't read.
Oh, man.
So they need that. Remso, we're going to get you out of here on this one. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Yes.
Yeah.
See,
that's that easy.
That's how you know that Remso's a real libertarian, right there.
It's that easy.
Can you imagine that anyone's ever come on this program and argued otherwise? Can you even imagine?
Why the hell wouldn't they do that? It's a sandwich. It's meat between bread, and then they say, "Oh, well, it's a hot dog bun." I'm like, "What the hell is a sub?"
Yeah.
What's a sub?
It's not a sandwich, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course it is.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
How hard is
what
that?
do you call Subway? Sandwiches. You don't call them Subway anything else. It's Subway sandwiches or subs. A hot dog bun is basically a sub. I've made subs with hot dog buns because they're the same exact thing, really.
That's been our argument for years, man. It's that simple.
Thank you. It really is just that easy. It's the frickin' altist libertarians that I bring on here that want to argue with me. You know what it is? I just got to say this really quick before we go now. You know what my biggest pet peeve is the contrarians. The meme, well, actually, the people
They're
that
the first people throwing off the helicopter.
Yeah, it's the ones that if you tweet out 2 + 2 is 4, there'll be that random libertarian. It'll be one of ours. It'll be one of our folks who will come in and say, "Well, Remso, if you really think about it, da 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 da." I'm like, "No, you moron! It's 4. That's it. There's no more discussion."
No.
I don't know what just happened to this interview. It went off the rails all of a
That's
sudden.
the only thing
We feel better now, though. That's all that matters.
Remso, thank you very much for being on the show, my friend. Guys,
always a pleasure.
We'll be right back after this commercial break. Hey, did you see the playoff games last weekend?
Oh, yeah, into the sports
Awesome
ball
stuff, man. This is perfect.
game.
Sports Ball with Mike Meharry and Alan Mosley. SportsBallPodcast.com.
Sports ball is not a libertarian sports show. It's a sports show done by a couple of libertarians.
For when you need your bread in circuses. Your ad could be playing right now, reaching thousands of potential customers. Sadly, it's not, but it could be. Find out how to be an advertised sponsor for The Gold Standard with Alan Mosley. Email us at tgsalanmosley@gmail.com.
You're back.
I just want to show this again really quick before we go.
Okay.
It's the Amazon for Stay Away from the Libertarians. Everybody needs to go out. So for one, you can donate to his Indiegogo so that he can get the next book published sooner. But I bet he would also appreciate it if you pick up Stay Away from the Libertarians.
Yeah.
I don't think he would say he would prefer one or the other. I think he would take whatever you give him. So definitely you should do that.
Yeah.
Remso's a cool dude.
Yeah, he's awesome, man. He's a great guy.
How do you not realize that a hot dog is a sandwich? Remso gets it.
I don't know. I'm telling you, a hot dog's a sandwich. Just listen to us.
He gets it. We're gonna have Bovard back on the show
Yeah.
here pretty soon, and when we do, I'm gonna.
But he's probably going to have a far more brilliant answer for that than anybody can imagine.
Well, he's already answered it. Remember?
Yeah, I know, but I mean,
No, his
I feel like he was
his
caught off
answer to
guard
hot
last
dog
time.
was it depends on what state you're in. Now, I was willing to let that go because that was funny.
That's a brilliant
But
answer.
his answer to is cereal soup was to lambaste me for my ridiculous questions. so I'm gonna think of
That
a
is a
new one.
ridiculous question.
I'm gonna think of a new one for him. Just cause.
Does it have to deal with food?
It has to.
It always has to deal with food.
I'm
doesn't
hungry.
It? Yeah.
That's why we need you to support the show at our
That's right.
Patreon, which is patreon.com/TGSAlanMosley, or go to the donation link on our website, which is thegoldstandardpodcast.com. Which I did them backwards.
You did.
You don't have to do any of the other things, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Our Twitter is @AlanMMosley, and you can catch these episodes sometimes live. Sometimes it's streamed, and I'm going to be honest with you, it was actually pre-recorded.
Oh, yeah.
But I'll be there, though.
Yeah, you'll be there talking to people.
So I'm
online,
there live.
Yeah.
Because people will be in the chat saying things like, I don't like that one thing he said, and I'll be there saying, shut up, loser. But
I laughed real loud just to cover up whatever it was you were going to say there.
guys, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next week.